So we're now in a rear vent, full cold, maximum speed, and it just fell out. Darn it! 1 second. Hello and welcome to the shop. I'm Jared and this is the Questionable Garage. Sitting next to me is our Cadillac Escalade ESV, extra stretchy vehicle. Right? I think that's what that meant. We picked this thing up in December from a viewer not running. It cut off while he was driving and we found a pretty simple fix for it. It was a broken wire from a wiring harness not being secured from a previous repair that multiple shops just couldn't figure out. And we got it done in a day. I then went ahead and invested in some stuff that I thought made it look pretty cool. We got the lowering kit to get this thing down to the ground and make it a little bit more efficient of a puppy hauler. While I've got a fair number of vehicles, I've got two Great Pyrenees, and they're very big and they take up pretty much the entire back. This is the dedicated puppy hauler, and we just wanted it to look cool, be low to the ground, and fun to drive, and be cool. But that's what brings today's video to us. No matter what I've done to it, it's still not cool. And what I mean by that is the AC. The AC is not very cool. It blows warm. Going down the road, you get a little bit of cool air, and when you come to a stop, the cool air is completely gone, and then in the back, it is blowing nothing but hot air. And since summertime is here, you guys might also want to be trying to fix your air conditioning, so I figured this would be a perfect opportunity to help work through a couple DIY diagnostic steps, some tools you might want to look into, and what to look for when your AC isn't working. And I actually think we have almost all of them going on all at one time. So it's going to work out really well to kind of walk through, show you what to look for, and then hopefully by the end of it, I'm going to have a much cooler Escalade. Now, one of the most important things before you start diagnosing a problem is to understand how the system works. Whether it's air conditioning, fuel injection, doesn't matter. Anytime you're trying to solve a problem, you need to understand roughly how it works. What is it supposed to be doing, so you're then able to look and figure out why it's not doing those things. So with air conditioning, it works on a fairly basic principle. We're not going to go too deep into the science of it. We're going to keep it simple because that's all you really need to be able to figure out why it's not working. Now, an air conditioning system is basically a heat pump. You're taking heat from one location, putting it into another, and that's how you get cold air. Now, you have several components in an AC system. You have an AC compressor, an AC condenser, an AC orifice tube or expansion valve, you have an AC evaporator, and then all the lines that connect those things. Then on the outside, you'll have radiator fans and things to help move air. You have blower fans, you have blend doors. Now, the main principle of what makes the air cool is that compressor takes the refrigerant, compresses it into a liquid. That process creates and generates heat, so that is then pumped through your AC condenser, where air will move across it, remove that heat, and that high pressure goes to your orifice tube or expansion valve. Depending on your vehicle, it's either a controlled orifice and the AC compressor is cycled, or you have an expansion valve that at certain pressures and temperatures will open and allow that fluid to pass. So you have something that needs to make high pressure, you have the condenser that needs to remove air, and you have your regulator, orifice tube, expansion valve, and you have the evaporator. And those are the main components of your air conditioning system. And ways you can help figure out where you need to look is if it's just never cool any of the time, you might be low on refrigerant or your compressor might be bad. If you're going down the road and the system blows cold, but when you come to a stop, it doesn't, there's a possibility your auxiliary fan that needs to push air across your AC condenser isn't working. If, when you turn your air conditioning system on and you hear an incredibly high-pitched squeal, that could be a bad AC clutch or belt. We're gonna basically work and assume your major components are working, and that's how we're gonna work through and diagnose this. So let me show you some of the tools you're gonna need, and we're gonna get under hood and start using them. And just like magic, we've got some basic tools in front of us. Really, the most simple thing you're gonna need when trying to diagnose your AC system is a set of pressure gauges. Now, none of these parts are sponsored. I bought all of them. I got the Harbor Freight Pittsburgh R134 gauges. Now, I say R134, it is also important to make sure you have the right tools for the type of vehicle you're working on. Pretty much from 1993 to about 2020 range, everything switched to R134 as your refrigerant type, R134. Before that, we had R12, which was found to have hydrofluorocarbons, HFCs, which was very bad to the environment, especially when it leaked out. So we, as a world, basically banned them and made the move to 134, which actually was probably a smart move, because R12 also, if it leaks and somehow gets into the engine and is combusted, generates mustard gas. Also not very good for your health. We are now making the switch from R134 to R1234. Why is it so expensive? Which is also very flammable. I'm not hip enough on the current reasons of a switch to a new Freon, but we are making a switch. So you need to make sure you have the right tools for the job. R12, 134. Now, for the most part, you can get adapters and connect 134 gauges and AC machines to the new stuff, but you really shouldn't. There is issues with cross-contamination. But you need a good set of pressure gauges because the whole system works on differential pressure, high pressure dropping to low pressure, so you need to know what's going on in your system. Now, I also have a vacuum pump. If you end up finding your system has a leak, there's a problem, you need to service it, before putting it all back together, you need to pull a vacuum on it. And the reason you need to do that is to pull all of the moisture out of the system. Now, you do have a dryer bottle, and its job is to catch and hold on to that moisture, but you want to make sure it's going to last the life of the rest of your system, and you do that by getting all the moisture out. And the reason you need to pull a vacuum on, one, makes it easier to put new Freon in, and two, in a vacuum, water boils at a much lower temperature, so you're able to pull it out in a gas form. So that's why you need a vacuum pump. Now, let's be honest. Most of you are probably just going to go to your parts store and buy one of these. They work really well. This is not sponsored. AC Pro, there's a lot of different ones on. The main thing is you want to make sure they have some type of gauge on the top of it. My personal opinion, I don't like anything with stop leak going in any of my systems. It's something that is designed to start filling holes, and when you have a system that relies on very precisely sized holes, something to try to clog holes, it's not a good mix. But if you're gonna go the route of an AC Pro or any of the other easy fix-it, these only work on low side pressure. So you're only getting half the information you need to figure out what's wrong with your AC system. So they're a reasonably good tool. It is a quick fix, but if you're trying to diagnose and permanently fix your car, this isn't gonna help you there. It's just gonna top it off, potentially get it working if you have a small leak. So we're gonna pop the hood, I'm gonna put my gauges together, and let's get them hooked up, start the car up, turn on the AC, and see what we've got for pressure so we know where to look on our diagnosis. And hopefully it'll be cool, because it's getting warmer if you can't tell by the sweat beads on my face and the fans all being off. AC is really nice this time of year. All right, we've got our hood up. We've got a GoPro aiming at our pressure gauge. Now, remember, if you have weak hood shocks, you probably don't want to hang that gauge there because it's going to make it collapse. We look at our components. We talked about the condenser. That is generally the very front of your heat exchangers in your cooling system pack. These are also pretty easy to see. That is your dryer bottle, your low pressure dryer bottle. You have a pressure switch because it needs to monitor to adjust. There are a bunch of extra lines on this truck because it also has rear mounted AC. Your compressor, you can't really see, but she lives down there on this LS engine. They could be in different spots depending on what you're working on. Now, one other just simple check while a truck is running or any of your vehicles are running, your high pressure should be relatively warm to the touch and your low side should be frosty. If you're kind of working through and have something just really weird going on where you notice your high side is warm and then suddenly gets cold, you're going to have a restriction in that point of that line. Now, service caps, you have your high pressure line, and obviously this is still going to be high pressure because if you look, it's the same hose. These are also sized. You cannot crisscross them on a 134 system. So you just need to locate and hook them up. I could have looked ahead of time to figure it out, but I can't remember. Is it down on that Y block? So there's the low side here. You can see the Y block where it goes to the rear and to the front. There are really helpful resources too on the internet to figure out where to hook everything up. So I might have to pull that up really quick to sort where our low pressure hookup is, because again, our high pressure is pretty easy. It goes right there. The other reason you need to make sure you know where your low pressure is, if you have your AC Pro, only connect to low pressure. This gets into the hundreds of PSI, as you can kind of tell on your gauge. That can get to really high pressure, and it's gonna have problems. If you ever see low side reaching extremely high, that's a major restriction. Low side, it varies on systems. Generally, you're gonna see 200, 250 high side, and your low side, 50 is kind of the high. Look up specs for your vehicle. Each one's a little bit different, but again, low side really should always be under 60 on a 134 system. I've seen some 134 systems hit as much as 300 PSI on the high side of pressure. You just look up specs. We're going through just showing pressure differential and how to determine if it's an airflow issue, a Freon issue, or something else. Okay. Well, remember when I mentioned GM uses orifice tubes? My guess is my orifice tube is right in here, because these are our two service ports, high pressure and a low pressure, meaning our pressure differential has to happen right there. But we are gonna go ahead and go in and start the car. Hopefully you can kind of see the gauges okay-ish on this camera. We'll turn the AC on and we'll come see what it's doing to get an idea. Is our charge pressure close to right, or is it catastrophically wrong? And what to look for next. Compressor just kicked on. It's running up our high side pressure a little bit. Now, something you need to realize, all of your pressures inside the system also correlate to pressures and temperatures outside of the system. So there are really handy charts that you need to look at to kind of confirm and where we're at, and roughly a 90-ish degree, 85 to 90 degrees, should see around 175 to 220 high side and 40 or 50 low side if our charge is accurate. Now, there's two ways of charging an AC system: by volume or weight of Freon, or by pressures. Weight tends to be a little bit more accurate, but that requires several $1,000s worth of equipment. So we are going to be using a pressure method. One other thing to note about this, I did mention that needs airflow, and right now, one thing we did do to this vehicle was a fan conversion. We went to an electric fan setup. This applies whether you have a mechanical fan still or an electric fan. These should be running with the AC on, which they aren't. That is part of the reason why when we come to a stop, we lose almost all cooling. So if this was a situation going that highway, it was an ice box, perfectly cool and comfortable, we would know we probably just had a fan issue. And that's where you would look to if this was still the stock mechanical fan. Is your clutch fan worn out? Does it spin really easily? So you know if it's not turning. Now, another way you could tell if it was just a fan issue, when you come to a stop, if you started seeing really, really high side pressures with the low AC performance, you'd be looking at a cooling fan issue, and you'd have to look at, is the fan switch not right? Did someone not get all of the fan settings correct when they did the ECU reflash?
Probably. Or is the fan itself just bad? Is the relay not working? Is something not working there? So I need to go in and correct some computer settings, but we can tell by these pressures we're a little low on Freon. So that sets you up for two things. You can grab your AC Pro, or since we have some gauges and loose Freon, we can charge it that way. And we're gonna work on trying to get that low side pressure where we want it. So how do we do that now? Now my AC Pro is used, so I can't show you that, but basically you put it on the low side, crack it open, and wait. If you are using a manifold gauge set, we will connect our service line here. We're gonna keep our high side port closed and open just our low side port, and that's gonna allow it to pull vacuum and pull Freon out of our can. So let me put that setup together and show you that working. All right, so this is tight. We do not have the valve turned in yet. This is tight. We're gonna open this. Gonna open it. Gonna start being able to pull a vacuum. Turn this in. And you'll notice now we're starting to see a bump in our low side pressure because this can is open and you can see it flowing. So our goal is we're going to keep adding until we see our high side pressure hit again about that 220 mark. Then we'll close it and see where all of our pressures balance at. And you hear the cooling fans actually just kicked on and our pressure is dropping a lot. Now, one thing that's tricky is when you're doing a can method, you do eventually reach a point where the pressures equalize. I get a little bit more out of it shaking sometimes, but we're probably gonna have to switch to another can. Yeah, all right, so reclose all your ports. My sticker's a little faded. How much? I think this is a 44-ounce system. Hopefully we don't exceed that. This will be 24 ounces if it takes all of it. This might just be a case of my fan settings were right and we're just out of Freon. And you see pressure starting to come up a little bit. Low side's normalizing. There you go. Fans just kicked on and our high side starting to come. Hey, that means I got my fan settings right, it seems like. But we're still a little low on the system. Silly me thinking this was going to be a really complex problem. It turns out when you have 14,000 feet of AC line and it's 20 years old, it maybe just leaked a little. But now I'm out of Freon. So my AC Pro has just a little bit left in it, so I'm going to try to get the last of this in the car. This is why I don't like just a low side pressure gauge. We need to see what the whole system is doing so we can plan and adjust and work accordingly. Now, trying to figure out the leak. One of the easiest things to do, even without adding UV dye. So you can eject and buy UV dye and a UV light, and you will see a glow. The other thing that works a little bit for you as well is AC systems need an oil. They have a PAG oil to lubricate the parts. So a real simple thing you can do is walk around your lines, look around all of your lines and all the unions, and look for an oily spot. That's gonna be your leak, an O-ring on the seal. All right, well, I have enough in the system that it's working. So we can go to the back and diagnose that problem. All right, so we are now inside. We've got, anytime you're trying to test temperature, make sure you're full cold, AC is on and you're recirculating, and we are starting to get cold. What's interesting is this is saying 70 on that thermometer, but I feel like it's actually a little bit colder. Maybe it's just that hot that I feel like it's colder. But we are starting to get cold air better than we have at all before. So Let me see if I got some more Freon. We're going to continue to charge it a little bit more. And then hopefully the car behaves and I can show a little bit more, because our rear AC is blowing hot. No matter what you do, no matter how we set the temperatures here, it just blows hot in the back. And it makes for some very angry Great Pyrenees puppies, which I don't blame them. I don't like hot air blowing. So we're now in a rear vent, full cold, maximum speed, and it just fell out. Darn it! 1 second. But yeah, in case you're wondering, it's like 105 degrees coming out of there. No wonder Pyrrha and Magni were angry when we tried to give them cold air, because it's not cold at all. It's just hot. It's not even ambient air. It is full-blown heated air. Now, this is where it can get a little confusing. When the truck or vehicle, your car is running, and your blower system, you only have one blower motor in most cases. In this vehicle, you have one for the front, one for the back. We now know our AC system is capable of blowing cold air even at a stop. I thought we were going to be diagnosing a fan. We were just low on charge. But part of that air conditioning system is also heat. It's conditioning air. It's adding heat when you need it in the wintertime, and you need a way to control it. Some older vehicles would just have a valve that would completely close off all of the coolant running to the heater core, which is like what the evaporator is for the AC for the heating system. It's a little mini radiator that lives inside, and the blower motor will blow the air over it, and it would heat the air. And in the old cars where you would just close that heater core off from all coolant flow, it wouldn't really heat or cool much, but it does pick up a little bit of heat just from the stagnant coolant flow, and it would eventually reach there. So you would lose a small amount of efficiency. So what most modern vehicles did, especially with automatic climate control, they have computer-controlled electronic flappers that will close a door and block the airflow from getting to the heater core. So we're only going to be conditioning the air through the evaporator. So what I think we have happening, we have two potential things. One, we have a completely failed orifice tube in the back that is not allowing any of the proper AC things, the AC magical pressure drops to happen, or we potentially have a failed blend door. So in order to diagnose that, we need to tear everything apart back there. The whole rear right side of the truck's going to come apart, and then we're going to get in and look at some of the blend door things from the outside and hopefully identify what our problem is. Well, this makes it kind of easy to show the basics of the climate control system. So here you have a blower motor. This is what physically pushes and moves the air through the system. If I had to guess, next up, I could tell for sure, but this may be the heater core, and that's the AC, or AC and the heater core. We'll find out here in 1 second when we pop this motor off. Also, the way you get different fan speeds is really cool. You have what's called a blower resistor. To get the lower speeds, they just send less voltage to the system. And the way that is done is through a different number of coils on your blower resistor, and it lives in the airflow to keep it cool. So you get your air, it pushes through. You have your mix blend door, which will then tell it to go through your heater core or your AC. It blocks. You can kind of see the sweep in it there. Then it comes through another blend door to tell it floor or up to your head. So we're gonna pop this off real quick and try swinging and adjusting it. So it was stuck up, which makes me think this is the heater core, because as soon as I pulled it off, it dropped. But we can fire it back up and see if we start getting cold air back here. All right, hopefully the wind noise isn't too bad, but with that flapper down, we're starting to get the air to cool. Sorry if the wind noise is much. but it is starting to cool off. And if I flip this flapper, it instantly starts to warm up. So that means our blend motor's bad. We could possibly steal that one. I think it's the same one. They are, but I say we just order a replacement, so that way if I want cold floor, or the doggies want cold floor, we'll be good to go. Still not super, super cold, but it's definitely cooler than 105 degrees. You know, after doing so many weird, obscure vehicles, I'm getting 2 actuators delivered in the morning. Overnight delivery, less than 12 hours from now, for $21. We're gonna have a cool Escalade finally. And hopefully you guys have learned a little bit. If not, tell me what I could have done better to teach better. We went over pressure. We went over how to properly charge and why you can't always just trust a can with a low side gauge on it. And we talked about a little bit with the blend doors. So I took that one motor apart just so we could see what's going on inside. And what's interesting, we get to look at gear reduction as well, because any attempt to slide this with all the gears in place, it feels like it's locked up, right? Ugh, nothing. But if we come down here to our electric motor, I can turn that electric motor, and the very first gear is turning very slowly. That's all about torque multiplication. So the motor's not locked up. There's nothing super obviously blown up there, but if we look, it has a simple position switch. And I wonder if that, somewhere in that circuitry, is what has actually failed. That these contacts aren't making good contact anymore, so it doesn't know where exactly it is, so it can't adjust it correctly. So that was just kind of fun, you know. I like to learn how things work, and simple position switches and gear reduction is how it flips that door around and holds it in position. Because by having that gear reduction when that motor's not doing anything, the weight of that blend door is not going to force that thing to move at all. So now we just wait for some parts and hopefully it's fixed. Well, that's kind of handy. Our inexpensive replacement unit tells you how to recalibrate, because I figured it had a position sensor, our buddy there, that there would be some type of process, and it tells you how to do it with a scan tool or without a scan tool. Installing it is kind of easy. It's just those 2 bolts back out and putting that in. So I'm going to do that, and we'll pick you up and find out if it works. All right, I'm going to go to the front. This is what we need to see move. If it goes that way, it's cold. If it goes that way, it's hot, and up and down is kind of just in the middle. So I can't really watch it from the front. So you tell me if it works. I can't hear you. The fan was too loud. Did it do anything? We'll just change it each time of the year. When it's hot, we'll lock it on cold, and when it's cold, we'll lock it on hot. All right, so I came to a realization as we were working through this. I expected a little bit more of a complicated problem, and it was just a little bit of low freon, and we explained a little bit about different components in an AC system and what their job was, what they were supposed to do. I'm a visual learner, and I realize most of you probably are visual learners as well. So, a little class time with Jared here. We're gonna go over, I've got a couple components set out and wanted to talk through them, and then we're gonna break out the whiteboard. We're gonna channel our Jason Fensky, Engineering Explained, and we're gonna hit the whiteboard to kind of talk through what we're doing, because the key
to any diagnosis. Anytime you're working on any problem, car, welder, home wiring, whatever you're trying to fix, understanding what everything is supposed to do in a system is the key to being able to fix that system. So first off, if we have a leak, you have low Freon, you're gonna add a little bit of dye. I talked about that UV dye system. You can use a UV dye in practically every system. There's different dyes for oil, power steering, cooling systems, AC systems, and you're able to use that UV light to react and help you find that leak. You'll find out if it's coming from inside one of the cooling fins, if it's coming from an O-ring where two fittings join, if it's coming from the front seal of your compressor. Using that UV dye is gonna make it incredibly easy to find because that is light reactive. It pinpoints you. I have run into cases where cars are leaking so catastrophically bad, we add the dye, we go on a short trip, and just the engine glows. Those are never fun. But we're gonna jump into the AC compressor here really quick. Now, this is one for a 1966 New Yorker. You heard me reference modern style being like 6-piston rotary pumps, things like that. This is it's a V-twin, like a Harley. You got 2 pistons, 2 compressor heads, and as you turn the compressor clutch, your piston will go up and down. Now, again, I got some footage of that Dwayne can put in, but the clutch will turn, and now the way you turn a compressor on and off is that compressor clutch. That pulley will spin independent unless there's power applied to this clutch, locks in and starts turning everything. And then it's just a matter of 2 one-way valves, very similar to, if you're familiar with 2-stroke motorcycles, reed valves, things like that. As that piston comes down, one set of reeds will flex, it pulls in, and as it pushes up, you take the refrigerant from the low side, compress it, push it out to the high side. Then I started talking about orifice tubes and expansion valves and evaporators. So this is an evaporator that has an expansion valve on it. Your high pressure refrigerant comes in here. This expansion valve acts on it. Now this is a style that has an external capillary tube. The way these work is they attach to the low pressure side of the tubing, and it has a very reactive metal gas inside it that as that temperature goes up and down, it moves the piston to regulate the amount of refrigerant moving through it. And then you can compare that to the orifice tube, which is much simpler. It is just a regulated hole, and the compressor pressures are what kind of cycles it. One big benefit of the orifice tube setup that is more if things go wrong, because they have such fine filters on them to regulate that valve, is if a compressor comes apart and tries to push metal through the system, while you're still gonna end up needing to replace a condenser and flush a lot of stuff, this is gonna catch and filter and save a lot of components in the car. So what you lose a little bit for fine control that you get with an expansion valve in the event of failure, the orifice tube works great. Also, expansion valves are $30 and up, generally speaking, most of them in the $80 to $150 range. This was $6. So a lot cheaper to make and manufacture, but those are the components we were talking about. Now, how do they work? So this is your basic air conditioning system, compressor, the condenser. What this compressor does is all these little pistons are rotating around, and we start making our high pressure Freon. And it's really, really hot, because when you start compressing excessively, you get heat. Now, I drew this more like a radiator. Technically, it's gonna be the evaporator. It goes back and forth, back and forth. So as we start coming through here, we start losing some of that heat, so it's a little bit cooler. And then we loop around, loop around. We come around, come around, come around, mixing with our black a little bit, to now it's just high pressure, not super high pressure and hot. It's removed a little bit of the heat from the active compression. Again, AC systems are air pumps, like your home air pump. You use fun physics and fluid dynamics to make heat go where you want it and where you don't want it. And then it comes here to our dryer. Now, we're gonna stop there for a second. The dryer's job is not very important when things are right, but becomes very important if they're wrong. If you have a small leak, moisture can get in, or if the system's open and it's not serviced correctly, moisture can get in here. The problem with moisture is it freezes and can create blockages and make our high pressure, low pressure transition happen in the wrong spot. So we've got, you know, 1 or 2 water dots working our way through here. So we got our moisture, and just like the bonus candies in your jerky and stuff that says do not eat, you absolutely should not eat, Descadent, that is what's inside your dryer, and it takes the moisture out. So a key is anytime you're working on your AC systems and you're putting a new dryer in, don't install it until you're ready to pull vacuum. If you do, it's gonna absorb a bunch of water and become no good because it's pulling the water out of atmosphere. It needs to be sealed. The other thing is when you pop the top off of it, should sound like your favorite can of soda or other adult beverage. You crack a seal, you should hear the vacuum. They should be shipped to you under vacuum because again, the reason we pull vacuum on the system when we service it is water boils at an extremely low temperature under vacuum. Ambient temperature generally will boil water when you're at the vacuum and service level. So your dryer needs to crack, sound like you cracked a seal when you open it. So we now have less moisture. We're still under high pressure, 200 PSI, coming along here. And this is where we make a difference depending on expansion valve or orifice valve. So the orifice tube, again, is just a controlled leak. So we come to right here, or if we have an expansion valve, we come to here, and we have a plunger system with a capillary tube that will sometimes be connected, or sometimes most modern cars, it's built right in. So we have high pressure up to this point. So then this is basically where the refrigeration cycle happens. The reason I'm not using a scientific term is there's multiple that can kind of sort of apply here. And in heating and cooling and heat pumps, it's basically the refrigerant cycle. Anytime you take something from a high pressure rapidly to low pressure, it is effectively boiling. It is a liquid here, becomes a gas here. That rapid change removes heat or absorbs heat. So you have that high pressure suddenly dropping to low pressure here. Both sides, this becomes low pressure. It comes around through our evaporator, and this is where we have a blower fan in the heating system blowing across here. This will then start to absorb heat from the interior air. Part of that absorbing heat, it also causes moisture to condense. That's why you have that little water drain, and when your AC is running, you have water dripping under your car. Comes back around. It's not quite as cool, you know, I guess we could, well, no, I'm using red to indicate high pressure, but I guess we can do the same thing. We're squiggly. We're really good, efficient, low pressure, able to take a lot of heat out, and then we eventually run out of thermal efficiency, thermal capability. Our refrigerant is once again thermally charged. We come to the compressor, gets really high pressure again, and we start the cycle all over again. So understanding how the system works, ways you can use that knowledge to try to help identify and fix a problem. If you suddenly start getting your high pressure line to start icing over here, suddenly it's iced here. You know, for some reason, there's an internal restriction causing a high pressure to low pressure drop, and it causes it to ice over. On the same effect, if you hook up your pressure gauges and you're seeing almost identical pressures, high and low, that means if you have an expansion valve system, it's stuck open, it's frozen open, just allowing pressure to flow freely so you never have a restriction to create that high pressure to drop. On your orifice tube, it means the tube is blown out, damaged. So the absolute core principle is you have to have a high to low pressure drop in order for the system to work, and you can kind of work backwards and find out what's potentially going on. Again, the electrical diagnosis is a lot deeper than we'll jump into. Basically, your compressor needs to get power to turn on. If it doesn't, you can look at your pressure safety valves, also with your pressure gauges on it, or if you have your AC Pro, you're just looking at your low side. If you plug in and your low side is in very low pressure without the compressor on, the safety switch is gonna keep it from turning on. So also talking about pressures, this is just an approximate chart. They exist all over the place. This is roughly an ambient temperature in Fahrenheit, and then in PSI, what a properly charged system more or less is gonna generate for a pressure. So 60 degrees, you're gonna see about 140 PSI on your high side with 35 on your low side. Also, you can kind of use this to roughly tell if you're near a right charge, in that you hook up your gauges with the system off, you're gonna be within 20 PSI of ambient temperature with the system off on your high sides and low sides. More or less. That's not an exact thing, but that's gonna help narrow it down, that if you hook up, it's 90 degrees out, and you see 100 PSI charge pressure high and low before anything turns on, most likely you have the right amount of Freon and you're gonna be looking at an electrical control problem. Hopefully this helps a little bit on a more visual understanding rather than me just talking about it. Got questions, write them below. Myself, some other smarter people smarter than me, will hopefully answer them. Because while the AC system is, kind of scary, it is very basic in how it works. You understand the basics, you're gonna be able to fix your problem. Oh yeah, update on my blend door and blend door programming. On the Escalade, well, the AC blows absolutely cold front and back. We're able to freeze ourselves out when you have AC max going, and the dogs enjoy it a lot. But that blend door wasn't the problem. We need the rear computer on it, and quite frankly, it's easy enough for me each season to just pop that panel off and manually adjust my blend door in the back. Maybe eventually we'll put a computer in it, but when you know what's wrong, you know how you can ignore it. And that is gonna do it for today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed hanging out a little bit while we got the AC working, and finally, we made my my Escalade cool. That's the ultimate pun, I know. I'm sorry, guys. It's a terrible one, but somebody has to do it, and I'm just the guy for the puns. But hopefully you guys enjoyed the time, learned a little bit, answered a couple questions. If not, again, comment below. We'll do our best to answer them as a group. I appreciate all of you that take the time to watch while we do some basic repairs, a little bit of education, and we do some crazy car builds along the way as well. But yeah, we're 100% done now. I'm Jared, reminding you guys to always make questionable choices. And the pavement's getting hot again. Don't let your puppies walk barefoot on the asphalt. If you can't hold the back of your hand against the ground, it's a little too hot for your poor pup's feet. We'll see ya.